everything that we're talking about is creating, well, it doesn't have to be. So we can back up. If it's the four directions, that's just so very basic. There could be a lot of reasons a person wants to just organize where their attention is. But for me, the only reason really I do the four directions is so that I can remember to redirect, only so that I can create a bubble of perception that is deliberate, intentional, willful. And why would I do that? Oh, there's so many reasons, and they'll all go back to the considerations of Don Juan. Because death is my advisor. I know that the iteration of Ernest that you see before you is a temporary apparatus. And it changes, and I don't know exactly how, and that's a separate conversation. But I 100% know that this particular apparatus has a finite coalescing experience moment. It will, in Chinese medicine terms, yin and yang will separate. They don't disappear. They don't, it's not as if now yin and yang just don't exist anymore. It's a completely different state, right? And I'm okay with that. It reorganizes. I'm okay with that too. That's all just, ways of talking about stuff. But ultimately, it's like, what do I know though? I see it around me that there's a lot of cycle and there is what appears to be beginning and end to certain aspects of the human experience. Notice how I worded all that. What appear to be beginning and end in the human experience. And so I use considerations. This is a part of my practice that I don't talk as much about because sometimes it can run up against a wall in today's cognition, right? One of them is using death as my advisor. Every day I wake up and it's like, I have to fill my bubble of perception. And it's not like that means YOLO. So let's say that, Shayna wakes up and she has the day off and, or like when she was traveling and she had a moment where there's no dogs, there's no dog care. There's that moment to relax. There's that moment where things can be clear and the practice can be engaged in different ways than when it is in a different situation, right? But it's still the same practice. Yeah. Any comments or questions? Go ahead, Donna. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You were talking about bubble of perception, and what I was remembering is that in the beginning, for me, the not in the beginning, but in the past, the four directions were a means to an end for me to get so that I could fill my bubble of perception. And as I've said it multiple times here, is that I prefer the ethereal to the more grounded experience. And so the four directions was a way to get me there. But what I realize now is that once I untethered from the four direction experience, then my ethereal experience was like a meditation, maybe. Even if I could bring it as a walking meditation, it was much harder to do. And then I would be distracted by things that pulled me away from my ethereal experience, this damn world and all this damn stuff that was taking me away from what I worked so hard to get to. And now I realize that both of them are needed because I can have those ethereal experiences, but I'm having them as a human being on the planet at the same time. So I need the four directions. And that, instead of what I previously perceived to be limiting the experience that I wanted, it expands. Once I ground in the four directions, now I can have both at the same time. And that experience with that woman and her child was an example of that. Less words, pure connection, clear communication, wider breath, quality, um, focused attention, but expanded awareness, all at the same time. So that bubble of perception has changed for me and how I how I experience conscious creation in my bubble of perception. Then you went on to talk about how your bubble of perception was different when you're on vacation because you've dropped all of the other things you have to navigate. You're not going to think about your bank account for a week. You planned all that in advance. Now you can put it all aside. So there's this whole breadth of things that you don't have to think about. So now there's more space. So now you can really engage that space differently. Same practice, same principles, but with different variables and therefore different outcomes, different conscious creation or expanded conscious creation. So, yeah, but my question was earlier on why I raised my hand. Oh, the yawn energy, the expanding energy of children, you brought that up. I was going to ask a question about bubble of perception, and I was going to ask you personally how your practice changes, but I think we just talked about it. So yes, depending on what factors are involved, but four directions is the grounding factor so that you can fill your bubble of perception and expand it. And you choose how to expand it and what ways to expand it based on, am I studying for a test or am I going on vacation? Um, but it seems like the yan energy you can watch. I worked with children in my career for a lot of years. And so you can see, when somebody's walking with their baby and the baby is just all expanding, giving back, and they make eye contact with you and they're like, that person sees me. And they're little, there's no words there. And there's so much less interference in that mind going on because they don't even have the words to fill up the space to pull them to cause the resistance. They don't even have the words yet. They're babies. And it's amazing how when you see that and you connect with it, you realize, oh, that's what I'm going for. I'm going for that space where there are no words and we're just communicating and smiling at each other or being astounded by something together. Or I noticed that your face is painted and you look so, whatever communication happens, it's so minimal, but it's huge and it's without words. And then as I've worked with children, you can watch how the interference of society comes in, and then you've got middle school kids having anxiety attacks because it's all words and thoughts and words and thoughts, and they've really lost that expanding energy, or there's been interference in that expanding energy, and the interference is really words and thoughts and beliefs. Um, School is really an indoctrination to things that don't always that we have to spend adulthood trying to let go of or free ourselves of.
Yeah.
That bubble of perception becomes cloudy and
Mhm.
murky.
Yeah. I mean, it always exists, but also what it does is it turns in on itself. So I was told, and I actually am calling a little bit of bullshit, but I was told that 50% of the population doesn't ruminate. They don't have internal self-monologue. They can, but it doesn't happen without them choosing to do it. And you can
Could
Google
you say
that.
that again, please?
So if you Google it, 50% of the population does not ruminate. They do not have internal self-talk. That it doesn't just come up, you know, on its own, that they have to generate it. Lyle says that he's this way. He doesn't sit around and thoughts just keep coming, and it's like that's something that he has to try to do if he wants to. Now, the only reason I'm calling bullshit on 50% is because in any room I have ever been in, if I said by a show of hands who has involuntary words occur in their mind, everybody is going to raise their hand. But I swear, if you Google this, it's going to say like 48% or something. And then
I don't know. I don't think those
I don't know.
they're not
It's
talking
tough for
about the
me.
same thing because everyone I know is
Everyone I
narrating.
know.
Some people are narrating out
I'm
loud
telling you,
all the time. It's just a constant narration.
I
So
hear
it's
you.
lots of words
But
and,
Google it.
and
It's
judgments.
I don't know. AI's lying to us on this one. And then one of my professors, actually, he's not a professor, excuse me, he's a supervisor in clinic, mentioned this, and I very wanted to have a show of hands, but I didn't want to seem like I was trying to prove him wrong because he's a supervisor. So I just like, mm-hmm. But ultimately, I'm like, but then I looked it up and like that statistic exists. But here's my point. It did make me think, though, that the root isn't thought, and it never has been. The root has never been thought. The root has been attention that is a leaf at the mercy of the wind. And even if you didn't have ruminating thought processes, if the mind is still a leaf at the mercy of the wind, you're still going to turn in the bubble of perception.
You mean like shiny thing, wind blowing a leaf,
It could be
that
very
kind
much
of
like
stuff without
it could be
words?
very much like that. Yeah. Yeah. But the point is that the underlying cause of the overthinking and the rumination is the lack of deliberate, willful intention. So it's still E that is the problem. That's the fundamental kernel, is that at some point we are never taught the, and I'm just going to say that it's nicely organized for me personally, and you can have completely different views on it, but Don Juan makes it very clear to me what is robbed of us, as we're a child, and we're not taught that human beings and what we can do to take responsibility for all of your thoughts, all of your emotions, that nobody's doing anything to me outside of physical touch, that death is my advisor. And the world teaches you very different things that weakens those principles. And I'm not going to go into all of those things, right? Because that's a whole different discussion. But yeah, I really like what Donna is saying, and it reminded me of something I was talking about with Shana this morning. And Donna said it, not me. Like I was actually not going to talk about it if it didn't come up. But there was a saying that Long would tell me at the restaurant, and I hated it. It was a trigger. He would go outside and he would listen to me. And he would listen, he would be patient, and come to find out he probably understood about 6%. Because there was a lot of work. And I'm like, Long, are you really understanding me? He's like, no, maybe a little bit. And I'm like, dude, I've been talking for 30 minutes and you're just now telling me that you have probably understood maybe 6 words. Can we start over? Like, okay, we'll just start from the beginning. But then Long would say, no, 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 no. This is your problem. And he would say the most riddling thing, and I've written about this before, but he would say, Mountain, you're like the mountain. Right now, like you're like a mountain. But later you realize there's no mountain. But then you still can't understand that there's mountain and no mountain. Mountain is no mountain. And I'm like, what the are you talking about? I'm like, I just talked for 30 minutes about things that were completely unrelated to mountains. And this is what you got from me. Like I'm supposed to be learning from you. It was so annoying. And then there would be times where Lyle would overhear and he would just walk out. He's like, here we go with the mountain bullshit. And I just figured it out today. Like I thought I had a handle on it, but I'm like, I'm doing a lot with my practice. Like surely mountain, no mountain is going to make sense someday. And finally it has. And what I did is I replaced the word mountain with spoon. And Donna just gave an example of spiritual maturation, in my estimation. And it involves mountain, no mountain, and then mountain again, no mountain. Now, Long used the word mountain because just same reason he would tell me about generals, because he learned this from his culture. And his culture often used figures such as generals and emperors and great doctors. This is just the way that people kept stories going. This is how you tell stories. You can't tell a boring ass story and expect that to be shared for centuries. No, you got to make that shit interesting. So that's, one person will tell another person, and hopefully the moral of the story is what's getting communicated. And we can still learn from it, even though there's some parts of it that are embellished to keep you interested, maybe this guy didn't get swallowed by a gigantic whale. Maybe that's trying to tell me something about something that I should be looking at. But so I replaced the word mountain with spoon, and I related that to the movie The Matrix. And I instantly saw my spiritual evolution and at times lack thereof. So before there was any evolution at all, actually, no, I was born mountain, no mountain, mountain, and mountain. Like whatever the hell Long is talking about, I was born that. And maybe he would call that the uncarved block. I call bullshit on uncarved block. There's some carves. It's not a lot, but we are born with a little bit of carve, a little bit of chisel here and a little bit of chisel there. DNA is a fickle thing, yada yada. And in Chinese medicine, we have what we call pre-heaven essence, the energy of the mother and the energy of the father coming together to form a brand new energy unto itself and all of that stuff, right? So at some point, interference and chiseling of my block occurs. I am told that a mountain is a mountain, and I'm like, yes. And I take it for not granted, I take it as stone cold hard truth that a mountain is a mountain. And I don't mean this in any kind of disrespectful way to anybody. It's just observation. People can live and die thinking that the mountain was a mountain and just a mountain and take it as and you know how I'm saying this, right? Like taking it as that's what it is in an absolute sense. Like it is absolutely a mountain. That's the way that we talk about things in the world. Does that make sense? I guess I got to understand that before I can explain the no mountain part.
Yeah, indisputable agreement of what we're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
indisputable fact.
right. Which you could start to argue Plato's allegory, right? Or you could start to argue what Don Juan would say is that you take everything as being real, as being a fact or as being fiction, but it has to be one or the other. It has to be this or that. And that's reduction mindset. That's just it's a cancer to the human species, in my opinion. So we're looking at the world as this is the way it is. It is real. I am viewing reality. There is no alternate interpretations. But then maybe we take some peyote, maybe we take some LSD, or maybe we have a life-changing experience. Maybe we have death brushes us. We talked about this, brush with spirit. We had a brush with spirit. And now all of a sudden we're like, man, or maybe we're a scientist and we learn about atoms. And then you go from inside atoms, it's like, oh, now we have a nucleus. And oh, but inside a nucleus, now we have quarks and all of these different, oh, and then maybe like Einstein said
Right.
that,
So this
yeah,
solid object isn't really solid because
it's not really
everything is
solid.
moving. The electrons are moving, the
Yeah, yeah,
protons are
yeah.
moving. Yeah,
There is no
yeah.
spoon, right? We went from there's a spoon and it's reality to there is no spoon. It's only yourself, man. And then we get stuck there. And then we're just like, the whole world isn't happening. It's just in my mind. And, I can ignore things and I don't want to feel that way. It's not vibing with me right now. So I'm just gonna switch it up. And that's what Einstein, yeah. And of course this is embedded in the foundations of Chinese medicine theory with yin and yang and the trigrams into hexagrams. It is everything is a hologram. That's why you can treat the whole body in the ear, you can treat the whole body in the hand, you can treat the whole body in the foot. The whole body is visible in the tongue, and the whole body can be mapped on the face. And that's why you have Fibonacci sequence in the tiniest of things, in the mediumest of things, and in the largest of things. And Einstein said, guys, I think that when we get to the atom, we're going to find smaller. And when we get to the smaller, we're going to find smaller. And then when we get to it, he's like, maybe this doesn't end. Maybe it's infinite. So a lot of people, myself included, for a period of time got stuck from mountain to no mountain. And it's all just energy, right? You want to be rich? Just think about it. It's all just energy. And I do this thing with my hand because that's how it makes me feel, right? But then it's like skill. And I'm sorry, this is my truest argument against just thinking about it. Because you cannot accumulate skill in any other way than through practice. I have never seen Bashar. I have never seen Abraham Hicks. I have never seen Guru yada yada wake up one day with a skill they didn't have before, to where they could just dig a well to maximum depth and find water and just irrigate an entire village. And they just woke up with that. They just knew how to do it. They could just perform open heart surgery. No, they woke up with some abstract ideological ways of understanding different understandings. And that can be very beneficial for a person depending on where they are in this mountain, no mountain process. But if we get stuck in no mountain, I think that is just as much of an error as getting stuck in mountain. Spoon, no spoon. But what Donna pointed out is that both are true at the exact same time. There is a spoon, but it's also made of quarks. And without the human being, that word doesn't exist, that function doesn't exist, that idea doesn't exist. And now it's like a sound in a forest with nobody to hear. It doesn't exist, right? Or at least that's the we're following the logic here, or the thought experiments. So the idea is that with spiritual maturation, you learn that, yeah, there is no spoon, but if I want to eat a bowl of cereal, pass me the spoon. Because both are true, and it's a constant transformation. And that transformation sometimes for us seems very slow because we're the human observer. And then there's times like Donna's noticing with her change. Sometimes it seems more rapid. But I guarantee underneath that rapidness is still something that's not changing as quickly. Maybe it doesn't need to change, it shouldn't change, and we don't want it to change as quickly. But I know that if Donna really looks at it, in light of what feels now like a lot of change, you can probably still find some things that are pretty constant, like attention itself, awareness itself. I asked AI this, and I blew AI's freaking mind with I ask it closed-ended questions. I try to get it to where it can give me some, because otherwise it's going to give you a 13 paragraph. It's going to list things in numbers and it'll give you a conclusion statement. And at the end, it didn't tell you a fucking thing. It just told you 6 different sides of an argument and just didn't say anything at all. What was I saying about AI?
You were asking it specific questions.
About what?
Attention, I think was what you were talking about.
Hmm. I have to think about the questions I was asking AI. Eh.
Very specific, you said, because you need both. You need the grounding and you need the point you were making was about how you need both things. The
Mhm.
spoon, no spoon, I need a spoon to eat cereal. And then even in the questions that you ask AI, you said you blew AI's mind.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. So if you ask AI, is everything in the universe changing? It will say yes, right? Everything is in a constant state of flux. Everything is changing. And then I can't remember exactly how I asked it. I'll have to look back because I take screenshots and I try to record it. But basically I asked, well, I know you don't know because you're AI. So don't tell me you don't know. I know you don't know because you're AI. But from a human perspective, it doesn't seem as if my attention is changing, or that when I look at my own consciousness, it doesn't look like that's changing. The looker, the brain, I feel like that's always changing. My ideas, my opinions, my emotions. And I just asked AI, is consciousness itself an exception to the rule of everything is changing? And it said yes. And I said, is that a contradiction to your earlier statement? And it said yes. So it had to admit that it had no idea. It was completely contradicting itself because it is both. It is mountain and no mountain at the same time. And what the way that we interact with that in real life is that there are always these forces, as Don Juan would put them, and they're constantly interacting with us. And the more that we pay attention, the more we have a bubble of perception, the less we have the resistance of repetitive habitual thoughts that aren't making us feel well, the more opportunity, Donna's word was accessible, we become more accessible to both and how they're interacting with each other. The forces come from the interaction, the movement of yin and yang, of these opposing, of what appear to be opposing forces. But we have to work with it because it's the appearance. It's how we work with it. It's how our brain understands it.
Well, earlier you were referring it to a closed system as opposed to an open system.
Mhm.
So awareness, so awareness of, doing both makes the bubble of perception and your ability to expand, contract, create it in different ways becomes more and more accessible. And then the more you access that space, then more becomes accessible. And
Yes.
as long as you're maintaining both points, and the opposite is true. If you're not maintaining both points, then certain things become less accessible
Yes.
and less accessible, and then the loop closes. It becomes a
Yes.
closed system. So
Right.
it's kind of always a closed system that is constantly expanding.
Mhm.
But the way that it expands is by doing both the things that you just discussed in detail.
Right. And so through the four directions and through every other practice that I do, you will see these elements of mountain and no mountain. So I'm expanding the bubble of perception through the Dantian, which is the center. So I maintain a center with expansion, a center within expansion, and
Oh,
expansion within
that's
the
so
center.
good. I didn't consider that at all. That was lost in my practice. I
Well,
didn't
this
think about my dantian.
that all comes from
I guess
feeling
I
for me.
do when I'm breathing, but not
Mhm.
as specifically as you just said it.
Well, it comes from experience. So when I'm fox walking, if I don't have attention on the Dantian and there's too much expansion, I end up la-di-da. Oh, I end up with, now my I'm looking at this and I'm looking at that and so for me, and that's okay at times, right? So again, it's not good or bad, but so for me, I noticed that that would start to get a little bit disproportionate. And then before you know it, I'm at the movie theater and I'm like starting to like zen out when I need to be focusing on something. So for example, I'm in a scenario now where I need to be all hands on deck, right? So my clinic shift starts at 12:30. I'm not here to talk about sports. I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm not here to make you laugh. I'm not here to be liked. It's 12:30. I need to get my room set up. I need to make sure that I have the things that I need in the treatment room so that when I need them, I'm not scrambling to find them. I need to go over their charts so that I understand the person that's coming to me based on previous treatments. I need to look up any term that I don't understand in that chart. I have to be about business, right? So there's a type of energy focus. However, this is an energy medicine. And I'm about to be in a room with somebody that's going to share something that's vulnerable. So at the same time, I have to fill that bubble of perception with readiness to listen, the readiness to hear what they have to say and try to address them without bias and without judgment and see what I can do to help their energy harmonize through acupuncture and the other treatments that we offer. But the point is that that's a certain type of focus that has to occur. Like it's absolutely necessary for me. So that's a circumstance where I have to have both. I have to fill the room with the bubble of perception. I want to fill it with safety. I want to fill it with, I don't know everything, but I'm going to just do my best to meet you where you are. And let's work together on what's going on. I know this stuff, Chinese medicine, and I think it can help. So let's see, right? But at the same time, I have to be aware of my own breath. I have to be aware of my own chi, my own energy, and that's through the Dantian. So through my practice and through necessity, I was able to learn that I have to have both. Otherwise, if I focus too much on the Dantian and I'm not focusing on the world around me and I close my eyes and I become too introspective, then it's impossible to do my job. I can't do that. Like I
Well, you're
can't go,
treating a person,
right.
and that person has its own unique set of things, of
Mhm.
factors. And if you can't, I mean, if you've ever visited a medical, I mean, all of us have visited medical practitioners,
Mhm.
and the ones that are outstanding are the ones that are doing what you explain. They
Right,
have a breadth of knowledge and they have a breadth of experience, but this is a unique experience because it's me
right,
and you don't know me and you don't know me who I am right now.
right,
And so you have to draw upon all those things to come up with a, um, a diagnosis sphere,
mhm,
a treatment sphere,
right,
and part of that is deliberate creation comes in, right? Because you have to be open to that space of what comes in that is a unique thing that has nothing to do with what I was taught to do in this circumstance or what the book says or what I've ever treated before. And it's an intuitive uh, thing. And in order for that to come in, you definitely have to be in both places
right,
because you have to allow the accessibility of that formulation of a new thing unique to this person to come in and then execute it, communicate it and execute it. It's just listening. It involves all of the senses
mhm,
and all of the practice and
right,
all of the data.
right. Yeah. And then just to sum it up specifically, my body direction, I'm paying attention to my Dantian, and sometimes I'll pay attention to acupuncture points. But that doesn't take me, I'll get to that. So I'm paying attention to my Dantian. I'm also paying attention to my breath. Of course, like I'm monitoring my breathing. I want to be confident. I want to be calm. They may tell me or show me something, and I don't want to be startled by that because that's not a good vibe. Somebody shows you your tongue, you're like, oh, that's not going to go over well. What is that? But you can't do that. So you have to breathe. So you have to be very present. I'm also aware of my outside surroundings because that's a part of diagnosis. So I'm paying attention to how they're sitting. Is one shoulder higher than the other? Are they kind of looking down and like, yeah, this is all indicators of something. And in Chinese medicine, we'll put it into different groups and it helps us understand the overall pattern of what could be going on with the person. But there's an internal point of attention, an external point of attention, a breathing point of attention. And then sometimes I'll do the running dialogue. I'll pay close enough attention that I can say, okay, so what I hear you saying, and I did this yesterday, I was like, okay, so what I hear you saying, because you have a few things going on, is that you really want to work on this first. And this is really what's bothering you the most, and it's been waking you up, and this is what I'm hearing from you. But if we can, you also want us to address this as well. Am I getting that right? So I'm trying to pay attention to a point where I can repeat it back to them. That's a cognitive trick of attention. That doesn't happen automatically. It's not a habit. It's not a ritual. Well, and I'm creating a ritual sort of out of it, right? In the treatment room. So I have four directions active. And guess what? I start to think about my tummy rumbles and I start to get hungry and I start to think about what do they got in the, I need to redirect. That thought's not serving me right now. That's not a beneficial thought. It's also kind of habitual that whenever I get hungry, I start to think about food, which I get it, but I'm a powerful entity here. Like I can choose to be present for this person and not just sit here and think about my hunger. Because guess what? I'm going to eat again. It's okay. Like I can be hungry. That might be a mantra that I tell myself when I start to get hungry in the treatment room. It's okay. You can be hungry. Pay attention. That's the internal self-talk that's a part of the redirection technique to get me back at the present moment so that I can do my job. And that's just one example, right? So the foundation practice is the four directions of attention. I use redirection to get me back to the four directions of attention. And from the four directions of attention, I can have my walking practice, which is fox walking. I can have my internal energy practice, which for me is focusing on channels and points, and that's called Neidan. It's an internal energy practice. I do it when I do my movement practices, when I'm doing Tai Chi in the kitchen, as Shayna said, right? She'll come in and I'll just be doing some stuff. I'll be doing my 18 gates, at random times when my body's like, do it. And then from that, I have Don Juan's considerations, all still coming from the four directions practice and all still coming from redirection. The moment I start to see myself get into anything that is unwanted in my bubble of perception, Don Juan's principles will remind me, where is your mind? Where is your Dantian? Where is your energy center? Are you a leaf at the mercy of the wind, just hoping to be entertained? I like entertainment as much as the next person, but my life isn't just endless entertainment and comfort. That doesn't make sense. All right. So I think we could still, if you guys want, we can still talk more next week about redirection, redirection situations. What are we redirecting back to? I can even show you how that fits with Chinese medicine. When you feel a lot of fear, what do? Well, what in Chinese medicine can help control fear? Your attention, your mind. You start to feel angry. In Chinese medicine, what would we do when we start to feel angry? We would breathe. Why? Because metal controls wood. And it works. It's like, what do we tell people when they're getting angry? Just breathe. But when you're afraid of something, you start over breathing. You might start hyperventilating. So saying just breathe, that's like, are you sure? So maybe talking to ourselves, mantras, earth controlling water. So, it's a organizational system that's like, that really helps me remember. It does. It helps me remember when I see something, when I'm watching a video and I see somebody get murdered right in front of me, like that makes me angry no matter who it is. Right? I see that and I'm like, oh, that's not right. Like I don't like that at all. And that anger is maybe an appropriate response. Maybe it's a part of a habitual repetitive thing that's not serving me. That's for me to figure out, not for anyone else. That's my garden to tend to. So, this practice has a lot of application. That's the time to redirect. It's like, all right, I feel how I feel about this, but I have to be very careful about what I think about this, how I respond. And then I'll look at it and I'm like, I'm angry. Well, what do I do when I'm angry with my emotional practice? I breathe. And what do I do when I breathe? I pay attention to Ren 17 on my chest because it opens the chest. And I pay attention to that energy and I imagine it dispersing into my chest and giving it fresh energy while I breathe. And then all of a sudden, I'm not angry anymore. The anger, and trust me, anger for me is like, you know, probably different than but that doesn't mean I can't get there. Somebody, it mistreats Shayna, that's in front of me or something like it's going to make me angry. But I don't want to respond in a way that's going to send me to jail for the rest of my life. So I better breathe that out. Right. Sometimes I have trouble with feeling excited about things. The way that I generate excitement is through ethereal spirit. The more that I pay attention to this sense of wonder around me, the more I feel excited. I can engender fire with wood. Wood creates fire. And that's how I create that. And in a cycle that's working correctly, what controls the mind? The thinking, spirit. Spirit should be the generator of the thinking and of the mind when not in pathology, because there's a how this should be working as well. Our breath should already be there, and then we don't generate that anger, right? So we actually can focus on harmonizing these elemental things. And it's just a grouping system that has body places that I can focus on too. And now in a world that's really nuts, if you're in the US, it is crazy. This practice is so important because I'm not Buddha. And I have to say, whoa, wait a second, Ernest. That fire is raging right now, right? Like it's really starting to get a little bit out of hand. So the fire is getting out of control. What controls fire? My will, my dantian, my focus of intention controls that. And then it's like this whole practice that we've been talking about suddenly makes this beautiful pattern that I can remember, that I can work with. It's not the truth, the way, the light, the ultimate, the yes, the no. It's not this ancient super energy, whatever, whatever. It's just something that helps me remember that works really well. That when I start feeling anger because I see something that I hate that. Like I don't want to ever see stuff like that ever again. Nobody should see that. So, but how do I maintain harmony and stay out of the extremes? So I've created an emotional and spiritual practice that it works for me. It really helps bring me back. It really helps me put things into context and into focus. And I think that when shared, it could work with other people. Maybe not. Maybe that's just like somebody looks at this and they're like, I don't like it. You know, I'm going to Anthony Robbins' personal power thing this weekend instead, or whatever. I don't know. But I do like offering this because it is based on very sound theory. That's not Ernest's mind. It just so happens that the way that I do my practice, I just understand it really well. And it just feels like it's meant to be worked with. I think this entire five phase was not meant just to be theory. I don't think yin and yang. I don't think the Chinese were coming up with mere theory just to entertain themselves or question and ponder the universe. No, they wanted to know how to live longer. They wanted to know how to live safer and with less conflict. And it didn't always happen because guess what? People don't always do the things. I don't always do the things. So I have this neat practice to remind me to do my things so that this life can be something that I look at in that moment of yin yang separation and said, hey, you know, for better or for worse, I did the best I could. I gave my impeccable energy to the universe. And I think that it matters. Like Donna was saying, you know, the way that Jean and Donna were able to move in a way that may have been very different otherwise. I've always said that I think that this practice has that implication that, and actually I think it's Don Juan's doing, that Don Juan knows, or the native mind knows that at the time of separation, the quality of that person's energy, the quality of that person's state of being. You can find this in Buddhism, you can find this in Christianity if you look for it. But the quality of that person at that moment is very important to the universe. I don't know exactly how. I really, so it's a personal belief. And you don't have to have it or share it. And I understand, but in this space, I feel safe enough to share it. I think that that is very important. There's probably going to be a little bit of fear, right? But sliding into home, right? It's a nice way to look at it. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments, sorry, I have to go, so we weren't able to. So I'm sure you guys have some thoughts from this, Lauren and Heather and Ida and Shayna. So please share them if you have them, write them down. Next week we can do a little bit of a follow-up maybe from this because we covered so much. Like I just gave you all of my practices, basically all of the things that I'm doing. But yeah,